You're listening to the Custom Built Podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to discuss paying attention to those little itty bitty details. So stay tuned. You know the details I'm talking about, those little ones that you don't think about until the very end, and then you find out there was an oversight, right? So that would be those kitchen designs where the drawers open up into each other, or you can't open up a drawer because the pole's in the way, or the refrigerator is maybe too big for the space and it blocks a walkway. Or that's kind of a big one though. Let's be honest, that's a pretty big design miss. But what about like where outlets sit, or when you're coming up with like cabinets and your outlet is just like a little bit too close to the edge, or your tile has to like go around it in those funny ways, or you're finding where you have to do cutouts in some different cutouts. So I want to just talk about that and talk about some of the silly things I've seen, especially with cabinets. Cabinets are always the worst because you don't always know until the very end. And when it's at the very end, I mean, that's probably a bad sign because now you got the countertops on. You probably have a backsplash in. It could be disastrous with a cabinet. So those small details is what I'm saying can really get you in some big time money conundrums. And so, for example, one of the last kitchens I did, we ran into a issue where there wasn't a filler in the corner, and the cabinets and drawers were bumping into each other. And so we were coming up with some different ideas to fix that. There was a lot of back and forth for that because, who do you blame, right? There was a lot to blame there. There was me as the project manager and checking the quality, right? The quality of the last, like the quality check at the end. And then there was the cabinet installer, right? Who does this for a living and doesn't, just kind of does whatever the kitchen designer who, was the one that said, order these cabinets and this is how it's going to go. So, with people with lots of experience, all three miss. It's like, that was a bad miss, multiple levels there. So, the outcome is you got to just find a solution. So how do we do this? Can we add a filler there? Can we obviously fix it without charging the homeowner? Can we do it quickly? Can we get the right components there? When a cabinet situation happens, that could be a pricey change, and you start losing confidence in people when you mess up that badly. But there are other times where I've seen where cabinet poles were on the wrong side. So like if your upper cabinet opens to your right, but the lower cabinet opens to the left, that's silly. And it's something that, can be an oversight and you don't notice. Or what about how the cabinet swings open? So these are things that when you're having a kitchen designer go through the cabinet design with you, these are things that you want to see. And a lot of programs these days actually show you how their cabinets open up. So there's a lot of really cool visual effects that you can see. So you can see it before it actually is in place. And you can also change like your cabinet hardware and you can just get an idea of what you want to feel. So really, really great software out there that can help you visualize this. So you're not missing these tiny details that can really make a big difference at the finished product, especially if you're not really aware of like how you're going to move. And then you're figuring out when you open up a cabinet, you're like, this seemed right, but it naturally doesn't make any sense. So even just after you have a kitchen design, maybe you just lay it out with some tape and imagine and kind of go through your kitchen as how you would be moving in it. That way you can just see it ahead of time, even if it's an imaginary see it. You can imagine it and kind of go through and figure out how you move in your kitchen and if it would make sense if a cabinet opened a certain way or not. So that's one way, right? Also outlets and where your light switches are. Again, a lot of this happens in kitchens because we are pulling out older cabinets and we think that all cabinets are going to be around the same height, right? Or if we're getting different, just like a tiny different, we didn't think it would affect the outlets or the switches. And it does, it makes a big difference. So sometimes there's a change in the design, but you want to pay attention to where your light switches are. Will a light switch fall into the middle of your design where maybe you didn't have cabinets before? Or if you did have cabinets, those cabinets didn't come down as low as the new cabinets will. So always just going through the space after you have that kind of design wouldn't be a bad place to start, just to make sure that visually and logically everything is where it needs to be. And if you need to move it, it's time to move it before you put that kitchen in to find out otherwise. Same goes for like bathrooms and outlets and switches for that. Vanities come in so many different sizes, and when you're finally changing something up, like maybe you have like a half wall between your vanity and your toilet and you don't want that there anymore. Well, what's there? Or maybe you want to add one, right? So can you add it without affecting your outlets that might be over your vanity already? So just taking the time to really pay attention to where your outlets and your switches are. And if your new layout or your new cabinet design is going to if it's going to affect what you're going to be putting in. Or if you're designing a house, or if you're updating your rooms and maybe you're taking some walls down and moving things around. Where are your light switches? Do they naturally make sense? Is this something you have to walk across the room to turn on a light? Or is there a switch that is right there immediately when you walk into the room? And sometimes when we're making changes, we're not always paying attention and focusing on where these switches are. Also, how are you going to use your room? There's rules and codes for how many receptacles that you should have in a space, but maybe there are enough code-wise, but is there enough for how you're going to be using your room? So is it your office? Do you have a lot of electronics that you need? Is this going to be your hub for charging everything? You can easily make sure at the time when it's early in your design, in your renovation, you can make these changes rather easily. But once you get to the end and you're like, I should have added an outlet here, or why is there an outlet here? I don't need this one. And is it just an extra, or is it necessary, right? So just paying attention to those tiny little ideas, because we don't think about those until we really need them. So the necessities that we have don't always make it to the thought process when we're making a design, because we're kind of thinking a much bigger, broader picture when we are doing that. So when we are designing and we're thinking bigger picture, how am I going to feel in this? Am I going to love it? How do I want it to be? We're not always focusing on, how about those cabinet pulls in there? Are they going to, bump into each other? Or this light switch I have to walk across the room to get now because I made this change by moving the door. Or I don't have enough outlets in my office and I really need more outlets, and now I got power strips everywhere. We don't want to do that. So take the time when you're in your design process and think about those little details with the light switches, your receptacles, and your poles, your cabinet poles. And the cabinets can mean that could be even in your closets too. And think about your lighting. That's a lighting design I think can get really overlooked easily when we're not focusing on interior design. If you don't have an interior designer with you to really focus on your lighting, that might be an aspect that can really easily slip through the cracks. So you might have your kitchen design all laid out and you're I just need an island pendants and I got a couple of can lights, but what about under cabinet lighting? Would that be beneficial for you? How do you cook? Do you cook a lot in your kitchen? Do you need some really great light? So just knowing what kind of lighting that you need in your spaces too, and just having that layering, that could be a whole nother conversation, lighting on its own, but focusing on that too. Just understanding, do you only have one source of light in a room and do you need more? And will one source be enough? Or do you want more? Do you want some ambient lighting? So many things to consider when it comes to your design. So don't let this scare you or overwhelm you. I just want you to be aware of the tiny details that are easily overlooked but make a big, big impact on our day-to-day lives when they're not thought about in the end results, right? So I hope this quick little tidbit helped you today. And if so, please leave me a review and make sure to share it with your friends and family who may find this little information to be helpful. And it would mean the world to me if you left a little review to let me know this was helpful. And I hope to see you next week and have a wonderful, beautiful day. Bye-bye. Thank you for hanging out today. If you liked what you heard, please make sure you hit subscribe. And I hope to see you again next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.